The two genders of podcasts specifically.
Awesome. That's you're funny, man. You're very funny, man.
And handsome.
And cool. That's so sweet. Oh my god.
I will pay you for that later, but yeah. That was good. That was
All
good.
right. It's me, Captain Pastana. I really wanted to sneak that in when I fade everything in. Welcome back to the Silent Podcast. I'm here, Silence. I'm here on a quest to interview people whose IQ are at least 50 points higher than mine. Hello, sir.
That's concerning. That's a concerning statement. What do you think I am? Shikamaru over here? Dang old making block puzzles, getting tuning exams?
That was an interesting pronunciation of his name. I listened to I grew up with the dub, actually, of Notoru. For those who don't know me, I have the entire series on manga. It was a weird way of saying that.
Until today.
I have it on tape. I have the audiobook version of Naruto.
You have the audiobook of the manga?
I gotta remember, it's like there's people listening at home. It's not just two dudes in a microphone.
That's
or
a good
two
point.
turntables and a microphone. I promise there's a point here, so I'm gonna finally get to it. Hello, everyone. Please welcome our guest, Joseph Fisher-Schramm.
Hi.
Hi. I have one question and one question for you only. How much do you like Prince?
A lot. Quite a bit.
You love Prince.
Yeah.
I'm trying so hard not to giggle without the pop filters on. So everyone who listened to the last episode, there you go. You're welcome. I'll decide if I leave that in later.
It's a explosion.
Yeah. Sorry, Dad. I want to talk a lot about your history. I want to do this in reverse. Tell me what's going on in your life now. I think I've mentioned it before, but let's say it again for the people at home.
All right. So in terms of artistic business ventures.
Let's focus on music.
Let's focus on music, yes. I have a residency at Dr. Jekyll's Beer Lab in Pantego, where I decided it would be a fun idea, and other people encouraged it for some reason, to do a different act every night for 7 weeks. So each of the different groups that I play with regularly are all performing. One of the nights I'm doing like a solo set. So I'm currently regularly in 3 bands, and then there are some other ones that are less active with me, you know what I mean? But I do that. And then...
You want to run through all of the projects that you're in that are going to be in it? Because I saw you in your solo act, TXYZ. This was about a week ago now that Mr. Jesse Katz opened for you.
Yeah.
In the last episode. I missed your show yesterday. Sorry.
No worries.
But yeah, like tell me the whole lineup for everyone listening. You know what's because this is going on until the end of April. Mm-hmm. So if anyone's interested, it's like you have all the time in the world. As long as I put this out in a timely fashion. So
if you are listening to this by April 27th, then you have a chance. So the first week, March 17th, was Jesse Katz group opening. That was awesome. And then my quote-unquote solo band, my wife always loves to joke about solo band, played. And then TXYZ, the J-Rock band, performed. And I'm a member of that group as well. Yeah. Last night, we had a band called Goolsby open. Court Huang, the singer-songwriter that I've produced for years, and his band performed, and I play bass with him. We're looking at adding sort of like a band name because the heart of this group is now bigger and it's a bit more collaborative. So we don't know what that's going to be called yet, but it's Court Huang, and then we have a 5-piece band with that group now. Mm-hmm.
That's so exciting.
Yeah.
You're a cool dude, obviously. We hung out a little bit before starting to record this, but I just thought it's so interesting, like how diverse your career has been thus far.
Yeah. We can get into that.
Yeah.
But
there's a lot to talk about there.
So March 31st, my friend Emmeline is a wonderful singer-songwriter, and she's opening, and my set will be fully solo. So I'm going to have piano, guitar, and upright and sing, and it's going to be essentially a singer-songwriter kind of concert. The week after that, I have Saul Sanchez and Jacob Farr, 2 of my jazz friends, and we're doing a night of standards for the whole show. There's no opener that night, but it will also be an open jam to any jazz musicians that want to come up. April 14th, my friend Tito Strange, he's a member of Daydream Sleep Shaker and Ceci Ceci, both really great bands, but he's also a solo artist, so he's opening for Envie's, the jazz fusion band. Yeah. And that show is going to be super fun because we're going to have a bunch of guests jump on and off. It's going to be a good time. The jazz fusion, 2 drummers. Jesse Katz is going to jump on for a couple of songs. It's going to be super cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
The week after that, Miles Kennedy is a local rapper. He's phenomenal. And I play guitar with him. His band is going to be on. And Honey Whiskey Jr. and Leiloon are opening. Leiloon just came out with a record recently. So that's pretty tight.
Interested.
Yeah.
Very excited.
And then the last week is the week after that. And the opening act is an open tournament for the board game that we're working on.
Yes.
And then the music concert side of it will be the music from the board game and the video game, because all of this is part of one big fictional universe that that I've mostly been heading, but like we as a team have been writing for years.
Would you describe yourself as a multi-instrumentalist? Because I know you play upright bass, electric bass, guitar, sing. Mm-hmm. Anything else I'm missing?
Keys, drums, uke.
Yeah? Mm-hmm. That is awesome. I think it's really hard as an up-and-coming creator to maintain a level of humbleness as far as when it comes to that, because there's so much fakeness. I'm going to say this because you've been doing this for a lot longer than I have, obviously. So as far as a life experience, like would you agree where it's just like, just little things that go nowhere? It's like, yeah, I play the drums and the guitar and bass, and I could do all of that by myself. You know what I mean?
No, if you played with me, maybe we could make a band, but I don't know if I'd be able to. Yeah, no.
Yeah. It's funny because I'm actually very inspired by Prince as an artist. I'll talk about it again. Like, there's a whole lineage there. I want to mention this because I don't want to make you jealous, but I might say something that might hurt your feelings. But I had the opportunity to visit Paisley Park.
What?
For those who don't know, this is the studio he'd built. I forget when into his career. You can look it up yourself.
Mid-late 80s.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for throwing that out there. We'll have our citations in the description. Yeah.
So for the Prince tribute show, or shows, I did so much ridiculous research. It does not encompass a fraction of his life, but all of the podcast series that the Prince Estate has released, I listened to all of those.
Oh, please tell me. Please, Chef. I will put everything down in the description. I want to know. I hope everyone else does too.
So he was working on Paisley Park in the same time frame that he was working on Sign of the Times. So between about 85 and 88, I think, is while Paisley Park was originally being built.
Okay. That's so fascinating because I, as a fan, I'm not going to say they catered to normies. I'm not going to say that. I didn't say that. My editor did not say that. It was a fun experience because what they're doing now, it's a museum like dedicated to him. If you're ever up there, you of all people should check it out.
Man, I hope to.
When I went in 2017, I was only the little bit disappointed just as far as because basically it's like, here's this thing, moving on. Like, it was a very quick tour. And, I know you got to get through, the line. They start off, it's so dope. Because they've tried to, leave everything, the way it was, which is respectable and awesome as far as it. The guided tour part, here's my review of this, experience. When I went, they went into a studio and they're like, here's, how everything, was left up in me, someone interested in production. I respect Prince a lot for being a multi-instrumentalist, having that independent, mindset and kind of maintaining that throughout, his career as, a pop icon for all intents and purposes. You know the history better than I do. This is for the audience. It's just had that DIY attitude about things, and that's just really commendable. And I've seen most of Purple Rain. It's something the film itself, and that's something they touch on if you ever go to Paisley Park. They have his dance studio there, and that's kind of where they dedicate, talking about his films. But it's just like quick and you miss it, and it's like it's just really fascinating, like knowing like that story because it is like semi autobiographical. Like it's he fudges the details for artistic purposes, but obviously it's like he plays the kid that's the character in the film. But it's him. It's like them talking about I forget the rest of the groups that he was working with, having like that independent mindset while doing a project like that and blurring the lines between like art and like his life story. I think just super fascinating. I've been talking for a hot second about it, but you've seen it before, right?
Yeah.
Do you have anything else like to add to that or?
I did not grow up in a household that watched a lot of 80s movies. My family is very much keep moving forward.
Yeah.
Which is not to say that we don't ignore the past or anything. Yeah. It's just that they didn't want to watch them. So I discovered Purple Rain as a movie and watched it for myself in 2021.
I should clarify. Same. I think it was on HBO Max.
Oh, cool! I found a Blu-ray at Big Lots over there for $5. So
I hope if it's still on HBO, like check it out. You should. It's a good watch.
It was surprisingly good, given the fact that most classic 80s movies that I've seen, I do not understand the hype. A lot of comedy that is funny at its time is considered offensive years later for many different reasons. I'm not saying all of those things are good or bad or moral or immoral. There's too much of a spectrum to say why that does or does not happen. Yeah. But a lot of things in those classic 80s movies, for me, do not hold up. Blade Runner holds up, in my opinion. Breakfast Club holds up, in my opinion. Yeah. Purple Rain was surprisingly interesting for me. And that was, like you mentioned, the autobiographical side of it. Obviously, how fantastic the music is, but just the fact that it's a well-written, well-produced, genuinely funny, and emotionally moving movie was one of the big catalysts for me wanting to do the tribute shows. Yeah. And dig in that deeply.
That's awesome. Mm-hmm. That's amazing to hear.
It was fun.
Yeah.
It was a good time.
It is a roller coaster of emotions, and that's what any good, secondarily to music, film is probably one of my favorite mediums, and what a way like to combine that, because this, but for the good folks at home, the album itself, they use some of the takes at the theater. The name is escaping me now, but it's very. I have a complicated history because it's like my mom specifically just didn't talk about that stuff like with me, like just didn't bring it up in the past, and it was just really interesting. Like once I started like taking music seriously. Just hearing it's like, yeah, I remember when that was happening, like just like the small talk thing, because like he started in Minneapolis, that's like where she was living, and it's like that's reel it back and like take it to those moments, and just to have like that little moment in time preserved is why it's interesting. It's of the times.
Yes, yeah, right. I have something similar with that. My parents. They come to my shows a lot. They're very supportive. Yeah. And I brought up...
As they should.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
Thank you, Mom and Dad.
Shout out.
To my mom and dad as well.
No, yes. just mine.
Just Joseph's.
That's not fair. I'm sorry. Your mom and dad too. I shouldn't have said that.
Please apologize to her.
Can you keep all this in?
Yes.
So,
of course.
I brought up at shows in the past that my parents didn't show us a lot of, the quote-unquote classic rock. Again, I do not have any issue with this. We didn't grow up with listening to the Beatles all the time or Pink Floyd or any of those things, just because we were listening to other stuff. It wasn't that I was at a loss. But my mom, a couple of years ago, just sent me a random text. It was a Yes music video. And she said, you said we never showed you any classic rock. I saw this band on a date with some other guy's name while your dad was being wishy-washy. And I was like, you're going to just say that as a sentence? And also you saw Yes?
Are you sure you want me to keep this in? Yes. Okay.
It's fine. They've been together for many, many years. You brought up that you guys talked about it last time, and you hinted at it right now. Yeah. So especially, our generation's kind of postmodern, nothing is anything. It's funny to consider what we want to define and what we don't, right? I, as a writer especially, more as a writer than as a consumer.
Sure.
I hate to use the word consumer
No,
in this context.
that's fine.
It's the best word for what I try to mean.
Yes.
So, as a writer, I hate descriptors. I don't want to give myself any reason to put it into anything besides just letting it be what it wants to be.
Yeah.
So whenever somebody asks what my music is, I pretty much always just say rock because the energy that I feel, no matter what the context is, has the same energy that it does for rock. And oh man, some of my friends are gonna be so
It's okay.
proud of themselves.
Oh, okay.
I don't know exactly how to describe it, but I, for probably about 10 years of my life, have just hated using genre at all. And I was like, there's no such thing as genre. We live in an era of the internet where everything is everything. Yeah, I hated describing things. And some of that is pedantic. And I've realized that as I've gotten older. Because I don't like the term progressive rock as a descriptor because everything is progressive or nothing is progressive. And that's a really stupid thing to worry about now that I've realized it. Because if I told you I was listening to this progressive metal band, you would know what I was talking about contextually, right? So it's so weird to go back and forth on what matters and what doesn't. And
We are very fickle people as artists.
Yeah.
Where it's like, we want you to get it, but you can't just say it because otherwise then you would just say it. Then you wouldn't be making an album.
Yeah,
Like you would just tell people on a podcast, we're going to talk about video games, I am sure. There's a wonderful quote from Shigeru Miyamoto when they're making Super Mario Maker. I'll link this down here so people can just listen to it so I'm not completely butchering it. But his approach, just for video games, like as a thing, I don't want to keep using marketing terms, but this is what I know. His quote, like I think is very inspiring. It's like with Mario Maker, like he was just telling people like how to make levels. He was like, yeah, like when we were designing levels, I would just think about like a person that I knew personally. Like instead of it being this like daunting task of like how do I get my stuff sold, like to the masses. It's like you just, according like to this interview, he's like, when I'm making a level, I'm thinking of like a particular person I know. It's like, what would they think of this if I showed them this? And like kind of like that approach with a editor, like a Mario Paint thing that turned into something bigger, because people have been asking for years and they found a way to do it on their terms. I have a very complicated relationship with Nintendo, and I'm sure a lot of people will agree with that.
it's a corporation.
I'm not gonna. Yeah, I am not loyal to any kind of brand. The fact that like after all these years he can kind of like maintain that attitude is I think why people appreciate him in that way.
Would you consider yourself not loyal to brands?
I mean, of course, like you will, but it's like you try and keep that like in check because it's like
It's a weird balance. 'Cause
Yeah.
I will be the first to admit that I am absolutely loyal to brands.
Shout out to Shure. I'm
Shout out-
using all Shure microphones today.
Which-
But here's the thing about that. Sorry, go ahead. I interrupted you.
I assume like what you were more meaning is until like a crucial point, which I think is what we all feel. Because how many people were dedicated to? I'm not going to give any specific examples, but anything
Yeah.
like that comes out and it's like, wow, that was super problematic of that corporation or that
Beppis.
individual artist. That was a big trial that you just had. I don't know if I should give that particular group money right now.
Yeah.
That kind of thing.
Yeah, sure. Why not?
And that is a really weird situation to navigate, like you mentioned, as someone who's trying to make a living doing anything. How do you make sure that you can live off of this?
Yeah, it's
while-
not just music entertainment.
Not at all.
It's just good business, and that's why I think it's because artists don't like to think of it that way. But I'm like, well, you can't sit there if you're not figuring out who your audience is. There's some level of work. So I don't know. Like, what's your take on that? I've been talking about that for a second. I don't want to get too in the weeds with that. I do have more things to say here.
We are always in a power struggle. And that is true in nature. That is how creatures mate. That is how creatures evolve. Inter or intra-species for people who do not believe in intraspecies evolution.
Yeah.
Whatever you want to look at, there is always a small, super rich power and everybody else who are victims of that, whatever the case may be. As sad as it is, it seems like at this point in human history, we are the best off. We have the best chance for a lower class person as you possibly could.
Yeah,
and
that's not a controversial thing to say. Some people might think that it's.
I don't know the whole
really
course
not.
of human history, but
yeah, but I mean, like, but if you look at history, and that's why that it's taught in school, is to just like to understand like where we've come from. It's like that's what art is. You can learn so much about a culture's history. That's why they teach Shakespeare. Like, you don't have to like it. I quite enjoy it. I think it still has like lots of value. That informs. It's like, oh, this is like Jesse and I talked about this a bit in the last episode. It's like respecting the masters.
you can kill them too, though.
That's true. It just depends. There are problematic parts of history. That's you can't just have a filter of like I've found a term like toxic positivity. Where it's like it's good to like have a positive outlook on life, but like it's got to come from a real place. You can't lie to someone's face and be like, yeah, I really like that. It's like that's not helpful. That doesn't, we've talked about progressing and like moving on. Like a lot of people like to think of it that it's cyclical, and it is. Like there's two, for history buffs, there's two kind of models for that as far as like, just up and up. We're always like, going, and then like, no, it's always a circle. And like, it's both. It's a little squiggly line. I'm drawing this out. You can't see this. There's no visual component. Sorry.
Just draw it on the audio.
Yeah. I'll just do that on the waveform.
Make a shepherd tone.
Wonderful. In my synth, I'm gonna figure out on this oscilloscope. God, I really want.
You're scoring this whole thing, right? Live. Where's your keyboard? Vamp!
All right. No. So it's like.
Don't let me stop you.
Yeah, it's like it is going up like just circles around like that. There's little like circles. It depends like when we're talking like in the macro sense of history versus like the micro. Like if you're looking at the last 20 years, trends come back and things happen and dip. But we can only hope that those dips only last for so long. This is very easy to talk about post COVID. It could have been worse. That's the most positive way to say that. It could have been worse. It could have been better. Always can be better. But it's like, like you're saying, you can only try and move on and like learn from history. Like throw out all the things you don't like and keep the good. Because if that's something that we value as a society still, it's like, that's how we've gotten where we're at. Instead of reinventing the wheel and fire every single time, with art, like art has a strong like relationship with like, technology. For those a little younger than us in the audience, but before the computers could fit in your pocket, it like we lived in a time where it's like that was new and could be appreciated. And like again, like they just don't know that yet. It's like no one's like really like sat down and been like, it's like, hey, this is the history. Like, be thankful for how, it's like we can only try and do this in the most beneficial way as possible, as far as like the discourse that happens like online. And I think things are changing. I think stuff's changing.
It's impossible for it to not.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully it's swinging in the right direction. But yeah, I think it's better. I say this because it's like in the grand scope of things. If you zoom out, it's like the internet. It's like a little blip in everything. And that's our main form of communication now, or mass communication. And it's like there's growing pains that are happening, and that we're navigating through. You enjoy Gorillaz quite a bit.
Oh yeah,
their new album Cracker Island just come out. I don't, again, as far as like understanding art, I don't want to just tell you should go listen to it, the viewer.
I think you can tell them to listen to it.
Yeah, you should listen to it because there's a lot of little things in there. It maybe not my favorite record from them thematically, but it's so easy to just like incorporate a little like something in there. Again, talking about art being aimless, it's like it's funky. You can just dance to it and turn your brain off, and that's fine. That's the wonderful thing about it, is that you can engage with it on whatever level you want to. That's what makes like good something with like mass appeal.
That's what makes Damon Albarn in particular.
Yes, he is an interesting figure. Their album Cracker Island has lots of themes as far as like again navigating like this world that we'd seen like in the last 3 years, and again like there's just such an information overload that's like happening, and it's like
All the time.
our lizard brains were never meant to. You sir, you have a microphone too.
Sure do, bud. What would you like me to respond to?
I guess as far as like, bringing it back to music specifically, because you have lots of different art ventures that I want to touch into.
Yeah.
But, just bring it back like specifically like with music. Like how would you think that you're navigating that as a creator?
Yes. Man, I am now a person with a fully formed prefrontal cortex.
Yeah.
I have been.
Remember, kiddos, your brain doesn't get fully myelinated until you're 25.
Yeah.
You're a young adult, but your brain's still there's still stuff happening.
I am now closer to 30 than to 20.
Yeah.
And
Same.
it's been interesting to see how much I've learned to navigate and how much I haven't learned to navigate with that.
Yeah.
It was January 5th, 2020.
Yeah.
And I did not like social media. I have had it for a long time because it is expected, especially whenever you're a young person. And I just didn't really use it. But on January 5th, my Court Huang and my solo band were doing a small tour, and we played in Denton. Or one of my friends from school and her boyfriend, now fiance, heck yeah, showed up. And
congratulations for them, and congrats for you too.
Yeah, I'm married. Yeah. So yeah, these people, I knew one of them a little bit. I had never met the other guy, and I was like, oh, who are you here to see? Because there were a few different bands, and she was like, you? What are you talking about? And I had no idea how they found out about the show, and she said, I saw it on Instagram. And that was mind-blowing to realize, oh, these things can be used productively as well as negatively. Because I was concerned about what you have already addressed, like the information overload about it. And I literally now at this point will move what apps are where in my phone so I don't compulsorily click them, because we all have addictive personalities to these kinds of things. And like you mentioned, if you don't pay for something, you're paying for it with your life. I didn't make up that quote. I believe that every little bit of good you do has the same kind of ripple effect that anything else, whether it be kind of like a middle ground or negative, whatever. It has an effect. So I'm an independent musician, and I'm now starting a company. Both of these things.
Yes, you are.
Yeah, they both require use of social media because that is the way that people market now. But I have decided that I'm not going to let myself worry so much about image that would cause a necessarily negative impact on somebody else.
Yeah.
As much as I have control over that,
Yeah.
Celebrate the positives. I celebrate the people that I work with as much as I can. I celebrate my loved ones whenever I feel like it's appropriate. And yeah, it's a weird and terrifying and dangerous landscape because there are so many situations that you hear or see. And you brought up Game Grumps last time as a great example of how many times do people
so great.
just bash on them for no reason.
Have you seen The Social Network before?
No.
It's a wonderful film. Very well
Like the guy who
directed.
invented Facebook? Who's the guy who invented Facebook? Who's the guy?
Yeah. I didn't see it when it came out, but I was always interested in it because as far as legacy, there's a little bit of lineage. I'm a big fan of Trent Reznor and Nine Inch Nails. He will tell you in interviews like how much he talks about Prince. Like Prince was his vice.
Nice.
Like as far as like, getting started. Like to my knowledge, and I will link if there's a interview that I can find, his history and how he got his start is just he was a janitor at a studio.
Yeah.
And they're just like, hey, like, do you mind if you let me like use your facilities to record some demos? And they're like, sure, why not? Like, just make sure everything gets put back the right way and won't be an issue. There's such a weird dynamic now as far as we're talking about employer-employee relations. You know, I and you can tell me if your experience is different. Like as far as like raised, it's like, you know, you're gonna do this thing, you know, work for this like whoever, and like I feel like there's such a big fear for like job security now, where it's like at least that was just instilled into me, where it's like, you know, you do this, go to school, like like, you know, do the thing you want to do, get a degree, and then you'll have a job for the rest of your life. And like that doesn't happen for everyone. That's not you know, realistic. When you do good things, you get good out of it. You know, it's you know, people want to have like fulfilling work. I say this as far as like that fear of job security, because it's like some of the most successful people now who like, you know, created brands that are huge. Say what you will about Steve Jobs as a human being, but it's like, you know, as a college dropout, it's like if you look at that history with like these creators, like these like businesses, like where it started is like they did all kinds of different ventures before they got there. They were not an overnight success. And I think that's what's happening. Because if you watch The Social Network, it tells like this thing, you know, I'm not an authority as far as like the accuracy like of the film, but it seems to line up with what is going on as far as like Meta as a company and the creation of Facebook, where it's like it just blew up and just got like out of hand. Like I would say, where it's like, how does someone even process like that kind of thing as a young adult? You know, Mark Zuckerberg went to Harvard and did this thing. In the past, you know, the expectation was different, where it's like you had like different things, and like you weren't one thing for your entire life. And I think that's as far as like, you know, sacrificing your product, your art for like just, it's like, all right, like what's like, you know, whatever. It gets fickle because it's like you do have to contribute something to society in some way, of course. You know, maybe we value that like too much on a monetary scale, but it's like, again, with some of these new like platforms like Patreon, it's purposeful, like the way they've branded themselves as like, you know, the patrons, you know, of the arts or whatever, like ventures, where it's just like that avenue is amazing that we have something like that now. I don't know.
And it's by artists who realized how few people were getting payment for their work at that point.
Yeah.
Which is also a very common thing in a lot of different jobs, not just music, in a lot of different situations. How many people do we know that have multiple jobs to support whatever they need to do in life? How many people... Man, you say you don't want to go into theories and conjecture. I've been spending a lot of time lately
I want to,
kind of pondering. There are very specific pockets of time where we, as a society, have seemed to be obsessed with the idea of doing good work, and there are times where we've had an obsession with not doing work. Yeah. And we have recently left... We, as an American societal young people, have left the want to work all the time for various reasons, and now we are trying to get out of that and figure out what life is beyond just working. And it's interesting because, you know, serfdom, but
yeah.
Where are we now? What are we doing next? And I say we, but I mean me.
Yeah.
I've been wondering a lot lately about, I'm not going to say you, I'm going to say me. I'm figuring out my place with what I'm doing lately. Because, like we talked about, I have all of these different projects and a wife, and the number of things that any individual will always want to do will be ever increasing, and the amount of time that you have will be forever decreasing. Mm-hmm. The impact that you can have is just different. It's not necessarily better or worse. then as you get older, you hopefully have more experience and wisdom and more people to help you. I definitely have been privileged to feel that way.
Yeah. It's okay to say that you're privileged. You know, like I don't mean that in the way that some others might, but
Well, the word privileged
Yeah.
has a very specific connotative meaning right now, but
Yes.
it won't always, and it it's different. That's why the fun of words, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Oh God, I can go on so many things. Like we talked about this beforehand as far as like etymology and linguistics, but that's neither here nor there. This is a music podcast. Do you guys remember that?
Is it?
Let's try it and bring it back to that now that we've had a lot of pondering. So it's like, since I've thrown that out there, it's like for you, it's like, as far as your board game, it's like the creative like ventures, you know, it's like, what do you hope that people will get out of that specifically?
You brought it up. I don't remember if it was at the beginning of the podcast or before we started actually recording, but you said that I'm kind of compulsorily creative, which is absolutely true. With just about everything that I have done artistically up until the last couple of years, it was just because it sounded fun to do. Yeah. Or when I wrote a piece of music or a piece of prose or whatever the case may be, it may have been to process something, but it was because it was cathartic and enjoyable for me. And the idea of making games for people to play is very different because I always hope people like the music. But at the end of the day, if they don't, I accomplished what I wanted. Yeah. So it's fine if they don't like it. But with a game, it is designed for other people to play without me. Yeah. And so not necessarily for the idea of legacy, but for the idea of enjoyment. You know, I wanted a game that was simple enough to learn quickly, but interesting enough to have, you know, long-lasting interest. Yeah. And that was still a personal challenge, but again, it was very different than a song, because you can write a song either by yourself or with two other people, or however many, right? And if you guys all like it, then the project's done. But if you, in this circumstance, with this board game, it's a two-player game. We could constantly make iterations on that forever and constantly keep improving it based on individual feedback in a way that is much more, I'll say, required with quotes around it compared to writing that song.
Sure.
Because people could always give input on, oh, well, you could do this with the song. But I guess primarily in my cases, because I'll make a very specific reference to a song of mine. There's a period of time where I was playing ukulele very seriously. So I was essentially doing like classical ukulele music, and I was writing what we would consider modern atonal kind of music, but for uke. Yeah. And doing that in the only outlets that I really had, like singer-songwriter shows, I knew it was not the best avenue to have it. But it was the only one that I really had besides YouTube. So I didn't care enough, right?
Yeah.
I was like, this is what I want for me.
Yeah.
And if you guys like it, which people often did, even if it was the wrong environment,
sure,
it was cool. I've had to spend years kind of, well, I guess that kind of goes into the concept of as you are younger, you're figuring out how different you are than everyone else. And as you get older, you're figuring out what all you as an individual have in common with the rest of the world and how you fit in. Yeah. So I guess that's kind of what it all comes down to, is this new idea of making games is a much more directly interactive experience for me, and it requires a bigger group of people, which is why we have a team that became a company. Yeah. And the soundtrack for the board game has been super fun. Did you get to listen to it?
No, the board game, no. I hadn't had a chance to listen to that.
Well, I hate you for that. I will never. No, it's fine. It's fine.
But I love that you, as far as like doing good business, it's like, what are my talents? What am I strong? And, you know, instead of following a trend, because it's like if you're doing that, people will know. like yeah. People can pick up on that so easily, especially like, you know, when you have access to everything.
Especially people who grew up in a social media era and beyond. We have spent so much time with it. We smell whenever we don't like how something feels. Like, we gotta hit a very specific topic for me to grow from it.
Yes.
But I've been reveling on it so much this week. So I brought it up as a joke earlier, but we gotta
Sure.
get into it.
Yes.
Are you familiar with VeggieTales?
I enough. I like it would constantly be shown to me. I did not. I was not in that space. I did not grow up with it that much. Is what I'm going to say.
So this week I listened to the creator Phil Vischer's audiobook about the story of his life from being a child and being a child of divorced parents, and he was born in I think the late 60s. So our parents, or if you have very young parents, grandparents, situations of so many people got divorced at that point for whatever reason, and how that negatively impacted the rest of his life as an individual, because for him, he was kind of looking up to a new kind of father figure in Walt Disney, and he wanted to be the Christian Disney.
Okay.
So the story of how he started a company, worked so hard to make it work, and what he thought was, his true north. He thought he was performing ministry with all of this, and how it immediately got out of hand, and how essentially that company fell apart in like 10 years. And so the story of him essentially like getting a multi-million-dollar company out of something that started with 5 people that he thought was for a Christian the most important thing, countering negative media, not by bashing it, but by just being good, and how all of that went wrong, and his coming back to, am I doing the work that I was supposed to be? How does this relate to my father and not having him in my life nearly as much, and that separation of my initial family, and how all of that trauma affected everything that he did for many years until he recovered from it? If he ever does. I mean, how many things do we experience in life that you really look back on it and you're like, I will never emotionally recover from this,
Sure.
So it was a deeply moving and fascinating book for his understanding of how a business runs, and for his understanding of how he just loved the arts and loved being a filmmaker at that period.
Yeah.
How he lost the ability to do all of that because he was so busy being a businessman. It was genuinely one of the most beautiful things I've gotten to. I will say read because it's an audiobook, but listen to. And also, he plays the voice of Bob the Tomato, so it felt like Bob was reading to me the whole time.
What?
Oh yeah.
Are you serious?
Oh wow.
I'm not lying. He voiced like most of the original characters. I loved it, and hearing his philosophy on wanting to just do good, and realizing that at a certain point he got lost, like as we say, we got lost in the sauce, right? So
Yeah. For a man who's lost in the sauce.
I have been lost in the sauce for so long. So you were there last week whenever we performed the concept album, right?
Yeah.
With my solo band. I wrote that concept album. Initially, it was a set of songs that were sort of related to the story, but I deliberately made the vocal range wider to be more impressive. And
It's hard. I'm just going to interject for a second. What makes the entertainment business a little more difficult than something else, and why it feels larger, is because you are putting a lot of yourself out there, which you should be passionate about what you do. Like, it should be as simple, because it sounds pretentious to certain folks, but it's like if you're making something, it's like you're an inventor. There's not, there is kind of a rule book as far as if you're looking at your influence, like musically, but you're trying to do something from scratch. I mean, as far as it being quote unquote marketable, it's like you're trying to find like an opportunity. It can be small, and I think that's where people get lost, is that idea, and like kind of the shortcut that before the 2000s, as far as like, you just make good music and you'll get picked up by a label, and people and they'll do all the work for you.
Which, that's, as you know, like that only happens if you're like super lucky.
Yeah.
What would that be? Probably like 3% of bands trying to make it.
Exactly. and it's like, and everyone wants that so badly. And I think that's something like kind of the predatory nature in the past, as far as record labels, like, just taking advantage of, like, again, the definition of like childhood and being an adult is changing. I think as we learn more, like, as just that understanding develops.
Yeah. What was the percentage of toys bought last year that were bought by adults for themselves?
Yeah. I guess that's true. Absolutely. Like, as far as, like, and it's very easy to just, or it seems like, to forget what that was like that, like, wonderment, as far as, like, it's like children are just as aware as, like, any adult. And it's like, again, they're not fully developed yet. They are simply ignorant. And your job, if you want to be a parent, if that's something that you are interested in doing, it is your job to inform them. And so where I think art is, like, meaningful is that it can tell you, like, a story without you personally having to experience that. It can help you, like, as a tool to figure out, all these things. Like, you can only go off of your experiences. We'd mentioned I'm a walking meme here, and people will understand if they're paying attention. I used to get bullied for like, I'd be called, like, a Narutard. Like, because
that's not a phrase I've ever heard.
Oh yeah, I had some friends where it was like everyone was trying to out geek each other. It was a weird dynamic. As far as, like, whatever.
You got to know the jutsu hand signs then. You don't know any?
I forget them specifically, but yeah, like,
I
know, but I forget, like, a lot. But, like, actually, it's really interesting. Like,
shadow clone my jutsu, boy.
But as I don't want to just always, like, be like, it's like, this thing, like, blah blah blah, because there's a connotation when you just, that's all you, like, ever talk about, of course. And I think that's where maybe, like, I may have annoyed, like, some acquaintances in the past. Whatever. But it's like, getting specifically back to Naruto, I don't know Kishimoto's history. And that's something I want to understand, like, the why behind it, because it's like what I've, like, gone out of it. Did you ever finish the series?
So, I watched the show through Shippuden, and I really enjoyed it. But, as you become older and you have stuff to do, I just never could sit down through all of Shippuden just because it's so long. So I've never even gotten through. Is it the Tatsuki?
Oh yeah, definitely read the manga. I heavily recommend that, because there are issues with the anime as far as that adaptation goes, with just, like, it feels like they had to, where it's like, okay, well, we're not caught up with, if you look at the history, it's like, we're not caught up with the manga yet, so we gotta
all that filler,
all of the filler, all of the filler in the world. The manga it's much tighter, and
that makes sense.
Narrative. I'm not trying to change the world. I'm just trying to change my little circle here.
Being in a conversational setting is so different than being in a scripted setting, because I mean, that's part of why people like Tarantino, which is not a rabbit hole that we should delve too deep into, because I'm a straight man. By the way, I'm sorry for that, everybody. But I am a straight man, so of course I like Tarantino. And, like, his scripts have just very human dialogue, which just means they're talking about nothing. That's all it comes down to.
Yeah.
And so it's funny to think about, like, the world of podcasts, because it is all about just letting people have this nondescript. As scripted as it is, it's never scripted, right? Yeah. So you're just going everywhere.
Exactly.
Mewo Biba.
Yeah, I'll find something. I'll be asking you about some things.
Yeah,
later.
Ask me about things.
So as far as, like, getting back to giving back to your community, that's with all of this said, because how long would you say you've been doing music professionally?
To avoid worrying too much about what the word means, I started performing live with rock bands when I was 14.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
I say 14 years because like the goal was not money back then, but
Sure.
that's when I started playing shows in public regularly.
Yeah. For me personally, there's a that sense of creativity and like, just being like, especially like electronic music too. I don't know, like as far as just being in the garage and just making stuff. I have that kind of like attitude where just like, workshop. This is me from my perspective. Just doing stuff. Like and then maybe you can think about it like later and reflect on that. It's like, oh, this invention that I found, or like, is I think like a lot of art is more about discovery. You as a writer, you sir, there's this idea as far as originality goes. That
I
it's like,
hate that.
I know, because it's like you're getting it from somewhere obviously, and you should cite it, and you should find like, 'cause that's what innovation is about, is like knowing what's there and then where you can go from there. And as far as like what you do with music and writing and like your creative outlets, what does that mean to you?
I don't know anymore. Like I said, it used to just be fun. I mean, that's not entirely true.
Yeah.
It used to be very much for fun and also for the gratification from others.
Sure.
My bachelor party in December was super fun. And afterwards, I was talking to one of my best friends. He and I have played together for years. An all-around fantastic dude. We've been friends since we were 10. Yeah. And we played in our first band together. We don't play in regular bands together, but we still do now on occasion. And I brought up that it felt weird that I hadn't played shows in so long. And he said, dude, I saw you play a show like 2 weeks ago. And I said, oh, it just feels like it's been forever. And he said, yeah, you're addicted. And I kind of stepped back for a second from myself. And that was probably one of the big catalysts, and there are many because nothing ever comes from one thing, of realizing how and where to best go forward, because I love playing, which is why I say yes to all of these different ideas. But I've come to a point where I've done a lot on my own for a period of years, in that I wrote the music by myself. I was pretty much in charge of my band. Yeah. I told them, for the most part, what to play, and I wrote the songs and chose the covers and booked the shows and did the promotion. And I love those people. I don't mean it in a negative way, but I kind of had a trust issue based on experiences that I'd had. And I wanted a very clear, this is the leader, everyone else is subordinate. Last year kind of let me have a mental shift as I've been reassessing what's important to me and to not me. Yeah. So where I am now is still, I love playing, but I'm getting a little weary of myself. I've reached a point recently, as I've assessed my, like he worded it correctly, my addiction to the feeling of being in front of a crowd and being respected for that. Yes. I want people to tell me that I'm good at what I do. Yes. And then I get to say, oh, no, I don't feel that way. And I'm like, oh, yes, please call me a genius. I want that. And I didn't want to accept that. Yeah. And I want people to say, oh, you're so good at that thing and you sing so well. Everyone wants to be praised. But if I want that praise, my cup will never runneth over, right? I'm trying to pull back. I've realized that I can be confident in what I do, but not worry so much about that. I need to get back to how I did it when I was younger. I did it because I wanted to. So my goal with groups now is to make sure that the people around me have the best chance too. Because there are a lot of things that I have done wrong and a lot of things that have been disadvantaged around me that have caused me to not be in some places that I would like to. Now I want more collaborative environments. I want to help people who have written songs, make them as good as they can be, and have them played. I want to play music by people that I feel like deserve canonization in that sense. Because we as individuals decide what is standards.
Yeah.
We decide what is popular, especially in the age of the internet. One thing that I really want to do is make a cover album, like what NSP did, but with songs specifically that I feel like want to be more heard and exposed. So some of them would still be popular songs, but some of them wouldn't be. Like I really want to record a song by Aaron Payton from the Vex Project and also many other bands.
Okay.
Aaron Payton is awesome. He does so much good work. But yeah, essentially I'm getting back to a place where not even getting back to. I'm reaching a new place of really celebrating and appreciating the people around me for the sum of our parts and doing it because it's fun.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, that's just a good phrase. That's a way to put it, because in our American society, because I can only speak on that, I don't know who else is listening right now, but it's like a good amount of like healthy competition is good.
Oh yeah,
that's what drives like innovation. That's what we've been talking about. That's why I'm like, I want to bring this back, like with your art and what you're doing. I will tell you, it's like, listening to it. What I enjoy about art is kind of like a lot of like the introspection. It's groovy. Like your music, and I see like your influences, there, just because I've done my research. But it's like you can like just like have it on like in the background, and then like when you tune into that, for you and for music like that's similar to what you're doing, that like introspection. It's like you just can have like something on to just think about like whatever. You can just like chill and listen to the instrumentals, and then as far as lyricism, it kind of grounds like that I mentioned in the last episode, as far as like the ethereal nature of music, like as an instrumentalist, and I know we'll talk about this soon. Yeah, it's like it grounds that when you're just like when you're listening to the words and like that context, it's like I get it. Like it's just like you just have that that way about you. So I could commend you, sir.
I appreciate
for
it.
this. Yeah.
It's been a lot of work.
What else do you need to talk about as far as the board game, your music, and everything else in between? I did read your book. We got about halfway through it, and it's fascinating. It's funny. Like the first thing, like if you're okay with me spotlighting it for a second,
I would be appreciative of any positive or negative criticism you have.
Yeah, the very like beginning.
What's that book called, by the way? What is it called?
You son of a bitch.
No, I didn't mean that in a passive aggressive way. I meant market it. Plug my book.
Everyone has something trite to say.
Aw,
Hey,
I appreciate that.
genius.
Everyone has something trite to say.
I love that word.
Yeah.
So,
As far as like, because there's lots of, it is a trend, especially with YouTubers or influencers on social media that want to do other ventures, of like, let's just have a collection of things, and it's like, what is it saying? And it's like, the titles are important. That contextualizes it. Everyone has something trite to say, and it's just a little collection of things. It's like short and sweet, and it's like, yeah, it's good.
I'm glad you liked it.
Yeah.
I was 20 when I wrote all but one of those pieces. They were written in a very concentrated period. I was in a band called Duo Contra at the time. And in January of 2017, we literally started this little tour on New Year's Eve 2016. And we paused the song we were playing in the backyard of this dude's house. And it was such like a college movie for a second. And this one guy, so we stopped at this gap in the song that's supposed to have a beat rest.
Yeah.
And it rips. I missed that song. But this one guy is like, 10 seconds to midnight. And we all count together. And then we cheer when it hits 0. And loved one, or, romantic partners kiss each other. And I was alone. So then we keep playing. And it was a super fun experience. And later that night, I heard one of my friends say to a girl, and they were both very drunk, "I think you are so pretty, but I don't personally find you attractive." And I walked the other direction. And so through that tour, I was playing an electric bass that was fretless, a Jaco-style jazz bass.
Yeah.
That was too big it was a normal scale length, but I have small hands, and I was constantly overstretching and not doing good care on my hand, and we weren't sleeping or eating well because it was a tour. It's like, when are you going to eat? When are you going to sleep? Never. Fun fact. So I get back, my hand hurt in a way that I had never experienced. And, you've been ignoring it for days because of adrenaline and being an invincible 20-year-old, right? Yeah. You're a genius. No one's going to stop you. Yeah. What are you talking about? So I guess it was 19. Wait. 2016 into 2017. So I was 21. And so my mom is a medical doctor, and she grabs my hand at the part that felt bad, and she said, "This feels crunchy," which is a bad word for describing the human body. You don't want to hear that
from your doctor.
So we go to a specialist, and I had pulled 2 ligaments and then sprained tendons all the way down my left hand as a music major, right? That's not cash money.
Scary.
My primary instrument in college, and I took lessons all 4 years, even though as a media major I didn't have to, but I love my teacher. So I could not play for about 6 months. Mm-hmm. Whenever I performed with the rock bands, I could just do keys with my right hand. So in the bands I was in at the time, I had to get rid of playing. In one of them, we would jump instruments, and it was super fun. So I'd play like drums, guitar, bass, uke, sing, and keys. Yeah. We would all swap. I could only play keys. I was stuck. The band where I was playing bass, I used my monophonic synth as a sub bass. And I was like, actually, this kind of works. In a worst case scenario, this is fine. I'm really glad it healed. But, I wrote music for me to play. Yeah. I wrote music because it was fun for me to do. And I was like, what do I do now? I had always written little stuff for funsies. Yeah. But in May, I had reached a point to where all of these new things were ready to just explode. Mm-hmm. So in the book, Everyone Has Something Trite to Say, available on paperback, I had just so many things. And I was working at a concert venue, and I remember working and setting up, and then we'd have a small break. And by the time the break came, I had this new one. I remember with Folded Arms specifically, because that's the first story in the book, and I just think I'm so funny. So I formed it in my head, and I just sat down and wrote it. Thank you.
Yeah.
I appreciate that.
You're pretty.
Pretty. So yeah, I just wrote it. And with every story in that book, because they're all so short, it was pretty much just like it exploded in one day. Yeah. The story as it was finally just like became its own in one period. Yeah. And it was pretty much all of them except for 2 were written May to August. One of them was written in September, I believe, and then the next one was written in March. Okay. So it was a huge, an explosive period for that little prose because I didn't have another outlet in a way. I'll say this for the first time here. We are in very early stages of starting our own podcast that will be a radio drama style set of my short stories and poems.
Wow.
Called Trite Things.
Oh my goodness.
We are in super early pre-production. Like, I haven't brought this up anywhere yet.
Very exciting.
So that has been so much fun. And again, it kind of goes, it is very prevalent to my idea of getting out of myself and getting back into, I've been so impatient at feeling like I deserved fame or whatever. And now I'm letting myself realize that what I wanted is not what I would have been given anyway. Sure. So having this group of people that get to act, and then Court Huang, the guy that I work with, is going to like produce and direct us because I'm not a trained actor. And so he is so brilliant and perfect for this. And we've done one reading so far where we did with Folded Arms from the book and Stained Glass Secrets, which is my favorite piece from the book because it's just so stupid and so Python. And I just think I'm very funny. Yeah. So, I have enough shorts for a second book, and I've considered putting out like a mini series that was like its own like 6-episode thing as a book because I don't know when I'd make the show. Sure. But now we might have an outlet for all of those things. Instead of me making another book, we would just make these series as a podcast.
Okay.
And I'm going to tell you this right now, kind of like how Danny would say NSP songs with titles that didn't have a song because they don't know how they're going to do it.
Sure, yeah.
I really want to write a detective series called Lyra Beek's Ostrich Detective.
Yeah.
And I don't know how I'm going to make that work yet. But We'll figure it out later. So hopefully this podcast will come out later this year. But again, like I am so privileged to have people that let me kind of just. I've reached a point where people trust me enough, and I listen to other people enough to not really get many no's anymore. Yeah. If somebody says no, it's more of a why. I don't think this is necessarily a good use of your resources and time, or just do it later. There's a lot of circumstances where it's like, I don't think that's a bad idea, but you got too much to do, or this would be much more interesting at this moment. Yeah. Like I really want to.
Timing is key.
Yes,
Yeah.
I really want to do a solo double bass record as well, but again, I literally don't have time to do that right now. But I would do a Roboth piece, at least one.
Eventually. Do you want to get into that now, or are you?
That was a
Are you
deliberate
done
segue.
shamelessly plugging?
That was on purpose.
That was a good segue.
Am
I the one being interviewed?
I being cool right now? Am I being cool right now?
Well,
Don't you guys think I'm cool?
since you mentioned it, we listened to some stuff beforehand. Tell me, like, your perspective, because I have a lot of things about it. But since your picks, I'm terrible at names, terrible people's
No
names,
worries.
terrible titles with stuff. Please elaborate on.
So you want to talk about the ones that I brought to you first?
Yes.
Okay. Well, I'm curious. Let's go with, so the bass player, his name was Francois Roboth.
Right.
And that piece, I don't know how it would be properly pronounced. It's Ritba, which means desert.
Yeah.
So what did you think of it?
So I actually also kind of come from a classical background. I came to UTA playing in bassoon.
Yes.
Actually, it's so interesting because like my struggles have been trying to, like, in the gigging scene that's here, like figure that out, because as far as like, I don't know, there are two different worlds. It's just how my brain works. Just learning that like scene. I thought it was just. Sometimes, like with that, we've been mulling on it for like a little bit. It's difficult to think of like a word, but it's more like a feeling than that piece in particular. Like I mentioned, like introspection, like it's just moving. So like that's all I want to kind of know, like your take, because obviously you had a purpose for showing me that. It's just we've talked about this as far as like an exploration of something, like like what can be done with the upright bass.
Oh, yeah.
Like I thought that's what's fascinating, and as far like why I mentioned coming from a classical background and like exploring something different with an instrument, because there's such a connotation like in society, and especially it's like they encourage you. It's like do band, do orchestra, do these things, try it out. That's great, like to know that, but at least in the music education world, we're speaking very academically because we're both art majors.
Yeah.
Sorry, everyone else.
I literally teach private lessons. I'm sure that if you don't now, you did at some point, right?
Yeah.
So.
Oh no. Yeah. No. That's
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
But it's very helpful to have like those skills, like those performative things in a recital, because it is more an exploration, like as far as like revisiting classical music, because I think a lot of people who even like study it wonder, it's like why are we still on this genre as far as moving forward? But it's like we haven't explored all of that yet. It's as far as like the sciences, like we've been, is like the mathematics. It's like there's so many different variables. It's like with Western theory, it's like you have your 12 notes that you're working with for all intents and purposes. Those like tones that repeat, but you're working with that, and it's like there's so many just possibilities, and like there's other factors of course too, but it's like what I'd gotten out of the piece Roboth, what I'd gotten out of Roboth, not being an upright bass player, I'm just like, wow, I didn't know that's something that could be done with
Right?
the instrument. It can be as simple as that.
Isn't that awesome?
Yeah. When was that recorded, by the way?
Definitely either 70s or 80s. I don't remember exactly.
Yeah.
But 70s or 80s for sure.
So that classical training, and also like jazz, like with how long that history is now, as far as like exploring like those outlooks, like compared to like contemporary art, it is introspective. Like you're there and it gives you a space to think. Like I like to think that like good art. We've talked about like specifics and like having like a message, of course, but like it also can make you ask the right questions. Like it's an exercise in critical thinking. That's my hot take.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I picked that piece because, this kind of ties back to my whole
Well,
philosophy.
I mean, you're also a double bass player.
Yeah.
That's where you started. That's your first instrument, your first love.
I will say technically it's my first. It's definitely my first love. My parents got me a bass player, or I mean, my parents got me. Why did I say that? My parents got me a drum set before then, which I would play a little bit for fun, but I didn't really know what I was doing.
Yeah.
But I started orchestra when I was 10, as many people do, and yeah, double bass is the instrument that I've played the longest. I don't know at this point if I really have a primary, just because I don't spend that much dedicated time on one instrument anymore. But the one that I know the most about, the one that I teach the most, if I was going to have to say I have a primary, it would be upright. And with my students in particular, but with the world at large, I want them to be aware of these capabilities.
Sure.
And Rabath was so important to the bass world, and his pedagogy was fantastic and is fantastic. He's 93, but he's still alive.
Oh, wow.
He still does master classes on occasion. He still performs
awesome.
a little bit. Yeah. So I believe 93. Early 90s. No, I've never seen him live. There are master classes that happen around. I just haven't been able to travel. But so in that piece, I told you before the podcast, but I'll say it on here. He uses very high positions on lower pitched strings on purpose.
Yeah.
There is a musical need for that is pretty much required for that piece. I had my fingerboard extended to play some pieces, primarily his.
Sure.
And there's tonal importance to him because he spent that much time with the instrument, but there's also, based on what he wanted to hear, it makes sense. And he uses the full range of the instrument all the time in his pieces, but he writes music that he wants to hear, so it is still wonderful to listen to. With my students, I always show them music by Rabath because he's so influential to me and to my technique. He saved my hands, honestly. Again, we decide what we think is important. You doing this podcast now is you telling the world the musicians that you think are important enough to spend time with, right? You've decided that somebody you're sitting with is interesting enough to bring them up later.
You're saying that.
I mean,
You're asking me.
yeah, I'm
Yes.
asking. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. That's true.
So that's why I brought him up, just because
Yeah.
he's just
That's what I want.
he's so dope.
Yeah.
So that was it.
Sure.
Also, he'd be ripping.
Oh, because that like honestly because the next piece that he showed me like just had stuck in my mind more.
Well, it's got a much harder groove.
Yeah, but yeah, that's really fascinating because there's, if my instructor's listening right now, I haven't touched the bassoon in a hot second, but I will be revisiting it.
Nice.
There's some interesting stuff. There's I believe it's Force Music. They call it the Jake. I'll put a link if anyone's interested. But they make a modded like vocal, if you know the instrument, and for those that don't, the bassoon's a giant instrument. Don't even get me started about contra. I mean, I was giant. Like I couldn't imagine carrying around a double bass.
Double bass is hollow. I feel like a contrabassoon is much heavier.
Yeah, it's probably a little denser, but you take it apart and put it in a case and all that stuff.
Trade off.
Yeah, but it's like basically like the vocals like the beginning, like as far as like the very like start. Well, the start of the sound is the reed, obviously, and like how sound travels, the acoustics like of that. What they do, they have like modded like vocals like right there for pickups. For like a electronic that you can plug in like to an amp or whatever and like have like that direct sound on bassoon, which is great. I'm going to mention her name, Dr. Laurette Bennett Cameron was my instructor. Class act.
Oh, she's so good and like so nice.
Yeah. Wonderful human being. She had this passion, like just has a passion for the instrument, and it's like just having that like is enough. And it like showed me just like she has like a little collection of early bassoons, like just God, I forgot what era it is. I'd have to speak to her again. You know, just like where it's come and how the instrument evolved. Because my history with the instrument, and maybe you have something similar, like to say, like they basically came to us with like different mouthpieces, like in elementary school, like just like, hey, like what do you like? And like I do not remember this man's name, but it just in that moment, like you just had a bunch of things, and I even kind of remember like I talked about like things I enjoy the most being challenging.
Right.
Like I mean, classical music is a challenge.
Oh, yeah.
Any kind of music is a challenge, but specifically like as a younger person, that's a struggle. That's something to work through. That helps you. Like that's to justify our existence. It's like that's what that's for. Is like you can take it or leave it with that. But I always found like kind of just the mystique like behind it. Like it's such a niche thing. If that makes me sound pretentious, whatever. They just had like mouthpieces like there, and it's like, oh, like here's a trumpet thing, and it's like, I'm just like, what is that? Like
Right.
I looked, I'm like, what is that? What is that thing? And it's like, oh, it's a double reed, and like it's like, can I try it? And like, I don't even know how they fucking sanitized it. Like in today's like world,
It would be a very different situation.
yeah, because like talking to like guitarists and string players like all the time, like you can tell me what do you think, but they're just like, that's weird. You put the thing in your mouth.
It is weird. I agree.
Yeah, but it's like
I started even bringing my own microphone to shows just because you have to get so close when you sing live a lot of the time
Yeah.
that it's like I don't want to share that level of intimacy with some stranger's beer mouth.
yeah.
Even if it's just my own 58, at least it's not somebody else's pre-warmed 58, you know what I mean?
Sure.
So yeah, I don't know how I don't understand the idea of sharing, and I know that like it's a different mouthpiece or it's a sanitized mouthpiece or you don't literally lick the new reed before you hand it off, but it's still weird.
There's such a thing for people that don't know what you do is like you have to soak it. Like you can't just blow in it cold. It's just gonna break. Like
Yeah.
it's absolutely like just a necessity, and that's a big thing is like just being a kid and so many moldy reeds. It is disgusting, but I'm just like
Yeah, my wife is also a band director 5 through 12, so she shared some of the horror stories with me, and I'm really glad I don't play those things.
Yeah.
It's really gross.
But getting past the grossness of it, like again, like I just thought about that now. I'm just like, yeah, they just swapped that around. I'm like, whatever, it's a different time. Blah blah blah. Moving on. Some funky jams. Please tell me the name of this town that it was recorded in.
I think it was Agadez.
Okay.
Um,
But the piece is something different.
oh, so the artist, his name is Mdu Mokhtar.
I'm new.
He's the band leader.
Got it.
And then the song and the album
Yeah.
are called Afik Victim.
Okay.
Fun fact, they were on Obama's list of 2022 records to check out.
Ooh. Interesting.
Yeah.
That is really cool. That's super interesting.
So what did you think of that?
You know what? Like there's again, just talking about like history, like it was a jam. Like just
Oh,
watching
yeah.
it's like as far as like the cultural exchange, like with music that we've talked about, there is such a rich history with like the drum set and like the like these different worlds. Like I won't get too much into the politics of that. The drums and like the very rhythmic nature of it's very different than Western music, and with how that was brought to the West, that's like the start of like jazz and how like we've gotten to contemporary music. There's a hit of like adding that percussion element to like the just tonality that it like is Western theory, and so it's interesting like to see it make its way back to like those roots where it's like not of like reclaiming that it's like okay, like here's how the music has evolved since that cultural exchange, with like power amps, guitar, like the instrumentation, like with drums, electric guitar, bass. I don't know what it means to you, but it's like just having like that part of the story of like just we're just jamming.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, the culture, from my very minimal understanding of that kind of music, which us Americans, the Western audience, is kind of called like desert blues.
Sure.
So that kind of
Okay.
Saharan rock music. There
Yeah.
are so many fantastic artists that are not that one thing, but just across the spectrum.
Sure.
As a quick aside, the whole board game and this world of games that I want to make is my love letter to that area of music, because there are so many inspirations that I have from there. That's why
yeah.
some of it is named after him in particular. But yeah, so the album and that song is called Afrique Victime. To deeply paraphrase it, that song is essentially about, this is a beautiful continent that, has been the victim of so much ruthlessness. So he just is celebrating how wonderful it is to be a part of that cultural area.
Yeah.
That huge cultural area that, deserves better. And we could say that everything deserves better. But yeah, and
It's hard to talk about. It is a struggle in this political climate, but it's, if you know your history, that's like the origins, like, of life. It's just really fascinating to think about. And
oh, I gotta mention,
yeah,
he is playing in Dallas in late April. Yeah, like a day or two before
dude.
the tournament and the concert that we're doing that's music inspired by his.
Yeah.
He's playing in Dallas.
I think that's the wonderful thing about globalization, is that you
There
can't
is
have
good
that,
to it,
that world. Yeah, because that's what drived rock and roll and how we got to that point, as far as like, the American and the British like audience, like those two different flavors of rock and jazz, where it's like, because jazz is a very, I think it's like one of the most purely like American inventions, as far as like, our country's history.
Hard to argue.
Yeah. As far as like moving that like into there, it was like just this thing where it's like, before, like basically laying the groundwork with like global like radio and those kind of communications, like that technology allowed like, us to hear like other things across the pond.
Yeah.
And then like back and forth, and just like they were like, there was a healthy amount of like competition there that like led to where we're at.
You want to know some other dope stuff about that group?
Yes, sir.
I was going to tell you anyway. So, Mdu, the band leader who wrote
Yes.
that song, he has a movie that, when the title is translated to English,
Yeah.
it is essentially Blue Rain with a little bit of red in it. So he
Hmm.
has like an African homage movie with his own soundtrack to Purple Rain.
Oh,
The guitarist,
wow.
I think his name is.
You should listen to the beginning of the
Amadou-
episode. We're going full
Yeah.
circle. It's a
Yeah.
long one, folks.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
The guitarist, I think his name is Ahmudu Adasan. That could be incorrect pronunciation or spelling or everything. But he also has his own movie that he wrote and composed the soundtrack for,
Okay.
called Zerzura, and it's super neat. It's on Vimeo, I think.
Okay.
The drummer did a jam session with Black Midi
Oh.
on each of their songs. So it's
Yeah.
like two drummers just going off. And that's what you saw on YouTube when we looked that up.
Yeah.
And the bass player, I believe, is originally from America and just helps produce their records.
Yeah.
And each of them have such fascinating stories individually and together. But Mdu's first guitar, he handmade out of like bicycle spokes.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Are you familiar? Because this is something I can relate to with Who Killed Captain Alex in the Hollywood films.
I've heard the name. I've heard that before, but I have no idea what that is.
It is very entertaining. Like in the world of like video essays and like film criticism.
Is it a movie?
Yes.
Okay.
As far as like the story and like, putting stuff into context, like it was made on a budget for that terminology, but they're like, just a group of Ugandan filmmakers that had acquired. Do you know what I'm talking
I've
about?
seen the Vice documentary about that group, right? Is it the same group?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Okay.
They have an audience now because people found like they just made DVDs and like the master copies of it are gone. And I'm all about like, preserving, like, archiving like all kinds of things. And it's like, yeah, it's like trying to like understand that. And, because initially like everyone's reaction is like, what hot mess is going on here as far as the world of like funny bad movies go. But on like it's if you know what it's quite inspiring.
It's
actually.
awesome. It's super cool.
Yeah, because they're just having fun.
Yeah.
Like they're just like, we're gonna make like a Western like action film, and they're just like, what do we got? Like, okay, I assembled a computer with like whatever. I'm like,
Yeah.
that's awesome. It's amazing.
Yeah, I completely agree. Yeah, I don't remember what that Vice documentary is originally called, but what was that? What is it?
Who Killed Captain Alex?
Okay,
Yeah.
sick.
And it's funny, and they know it, and that's as far as being like transparent. Like they're, it doesn't take itself too seriously. Like it's trying to be like a little tongue in cheek.
Yeah.
They're fully aware of that, and it's good to have that self awareness instead of a pretense of like, oh, I want to like whatever, and it's like, well, is that really what you want or no?
There's so many great outlets for like great art nowadays from all over the world, and I'm so glad that we have situations like this where we can bring up something that somebody may not have found otherwise. I had forgotten about that for years.
Yeah.
Jesse showed us that.
Well, I
Visionary icon.
I knew about it like because it's like it's really interesting. Like when you dig into it, it's like there's like a culture of VJs as the term that they'll use, like video jockeys, not like a DJ.
Okay.
Like it's that equivalent. So there's like the original copy doesn't exist, but like they just pass it around and like kind of like with how memes are, where it's like just that kind of like exchange. You can have some pretty tasteful memes, some artful memes. But it's like
in Michigan.
like literally it's like just this guy like is just like his energy is like so like, and that's like half of like the entertainment value of the film. Like is that his commentary. It's like their form of commentary tracks. There, to my knowledge, isn't a version that exists without the VJ commentary.
Oh.
And so it's like that's
funny.
Yeah, it's hilarious. It's funny.
Mystery
it's good to
Science
laugh.
Theater.
Yeah, exactly.
Neat.
Yes, we are all more alike than we'll give us credit for.
It's so true.
Yeah. Well, are you ready to talk about my picks?
Can we take 45 seconds?
Yes.
I'm sorry. I have to pee again.
Yes, sir. I'm going to pause it and make sure everything's saved and recorded. You got it?
Leave this in.
Okay.
Don't leave this in.
I will not. Welcome back to Tangents, the podcast.
Sup, nerds? It's Waddle Dee Wednesday.
We had mentioned previously, as far as like going through archives for all intents and purposes, and reevaluating older music. For those of you who don't know me, I am a huge appreciator of Linkin Park, Mike Shinoda. I'm not going to list all their names, but I could. But they had done a lot for me, and just full disclosure, it's like right now they are doing a 20th anniversary edition of Meteora, and talking about marketability, I think those guys are way smarter than they'll ever credit themselves for. Just their story is like very interesting, like going through some things I didn't even know, like as a super mega fan. They're kind of setting a precedent. They had done this with Hybrid Theory, their debut. They're probably like the first band like I really discovered for myself as like a young person.
Nice.
Talking about the internet. There's a thing and like an intention to what I did. So I'll let you talk on what you thought about this. I'm just getting all the context out of the way. This is recorded on the 25th of March. I'd shown you for the 20th anniversary of Meteora, they're doing, they have 2 singles out now for the release, coming soon. What were your thoughts on that? I had showed you the visualizer that they're doing.
Again, for my own contextualization.
Yeah.
The first song's name was...
Lost.
Lost, and the second one was Fighting?
Fighting Myself.
Fighting Myself.
Yes.
Right. Meteora. Yeah. So I know a little bit about Linkin Park. I know my brother had Meteora on CD, and I remember very specific of their huge singles. So I remember Crawling whenever that first came out on VH1 Top 20. Because I was, young, and that's what we would watch on Saturdays with my family. So I remember the big ones: Crawling, Numb, the music videos as well, because that's what we saw. And Breaking the Habit especially. That was one of my favorite songs because of the animated video. And was that on Meteora is what I'm asking?
Yes.
Okay, so
I think you're picking up on what. Yeah, go ahead.
yeah, so Breaking the Habit in particular is the one that I remember because I adored that song and I adored that video. And then What I've Done came out, 7 years later? Those are the big ones that I remember.
Yeah, those are the big three.
What about Giving Up? Which record is that on?
That's Minutes to Midnight.
Oh, so that's also with What I've Done. What I've done. What I've done.
Yeah. That's 2007.
Yeah.
That was 15, 16 years ago.
Yeah. So the takeaways that I had from... Man, I already blanked. The first one was called Lost, and the second one was Fighting Myself.
Yeah, there's a reason. I mean, it was Lost. I'll explain, and I'll put the interview down. But yeah,
These songs, and hearing Chester sing as he always did with so much heart, and also like how he maintained his control with that much grit. I can't sing with grit. I just can't do it. My throat isn't built for it.
Yeah.
But the heart and the lyrics, hearing and thinking through my minimal knowledge of their catalog, how much pain was expressed through all that.
Yeah.
And then to his end, hearing even more songs where it's essentially just expressing like a level of self-loathing is how I perceived it. And and again, contextualizing it to his passing is tragic. And with Lost, as far as I could tell, that was a song that was produced enough that they could have released it. For whatever reason, record labels love to not release whole songs or whole albums, and that's a whole thing. But Fighting Myself, I definitely heard how they could have potentially produced it more.
Sure.
But it makes sense that they decided to bring them back in this situation. And the videos I thought were very interesting to watch, but they're visualizers and not videos. So
Yeah.
they definitely, for me, raised questions, but not as many questions as I would have liked, because my mental reference is still Breaking the Habit.
Yeah.
Because that was so neat.
Yeah.
And I was also 8 or something. So I thought that they were very heartfelt and good songs. And do you have any idea if they ever still played them after that?
Oh, yeah. Like
So they were still live songs then.
They did a good job of balancing, again, again, I'm very biased. I'll be the first person to admit that. But, from my perspective, it's like they, those songs, like it's like, of course, with the tour for the album, they're going to play a lot of the stuff from the new album. But it's like they knew what was popular, like as far as like what resonated with their audience.
Depression.
Exactly. And it's like, they're fully aware of that and just wore that like on their sleeves. But I think that level of like honestness like scared people, as far as like the negative reactions to some of it. Because in the 2010s, they were not as popular, which is fine.
When you reach a level that high, it is not likely that you'll reach that same height often.
No.
Especially not with a band.
And of course they're going to do things to maintain their success and their families, but it's like again, it was on their terms. Like they always did something as far as like having challenging music for mass appeal. Again, I think it's a masterclass in that.
Well, I have a question.
Yeah.
You mentioned that the band, that the people involved in the band connect well with the fan base.
Sure.
Do you feel like these songs? Well, how do you feel about them releasing these songs in particular
it's very personal. Like it feels like an earnest. Like of course, like I paid the $200 to pre-order it, but like that's my decision.
That's
like,
a lot of money.
I mean, it's quite a lot, but like
I'm not
again,
saying too much.
I know it's crazy. It really is like wild, but I'm like, yeah, that means enough to me. Because again, with the first one, during interviews during COVID, Mike Chiodo is like why would we make a box set and just digging through stuff? Because I mentioned to you before we started recording, their fan base and having their own fan club that they'd started, like kind of grassroots. It was started by fans, but they kind of organized it, of course. To have things on their terms. Would have like a CD like every year until Chester passed away. And a lot of the later ones like feature demos, and it's almost like liner notes. It is like that thing of like you just listen to it like just instrumental tracks or like whatever. It's like here's the process. It's like if you're interested in that, they just provided that kind of thing and had that level of engagement going into the new millennia, which is amazing. So for these two songs, Lost, you're right. So in this interview I saw when Lost came out, it was between that song and Numb to be put on the record.
Oh, really?
Yes. And it's like, so again, it's like, just good way of like recontextualizing this old music. Because like it was well produced, because that's probably the huge single. That's the album closer, Numb.
I would consider Numb to probably be their most universal track, right?
Yes. And kind of some of the history is like, if you knew, you knew. A lot of this stuff had like leaked forever ago, and just fans like were just wanting more, and they like it had been passed around. So it is kind of like a celebration of that, and the band will acknowledge that.
That's awesome.
Yeah, that it's like, okay, here's this like 20 years later in an official capacity. Like it's like, these people that had memories of it, just being passed along online, it's like, here you are in like the most cleanest version of it possible to you. And so with that, it's like, the visualizer, if you watch it on YouTube, it's, using AI assisted stuff with like the anime like filter. But a lot of it was like behind the scenes footage of them working on Meteora, pretty much.
That's what I was wondering, because it looked exactly like
for Lost. Yeah.
they looked like the like shots of them live with an AI filter on it.
Yes. And it's like kind of like acknowledging that history specifically, like, with breaking the habit.
The only hesitation that I have, and not for the sake of being rude, but for the sake of it being a discussion that I'll say what I mean first, and then I'll explain after.
Sure.
I was not pro the AI animation choice.
Fair enough.
I understand that is a snowball that can never be stopped. I also believe that if you disagree with something, you should say you are against it. But also, it's a situation where it's like, this is an unstoppable force. I'm not going to endorse it.
Yeah.
I think it would have been cooler if it was hand drawn, like breaking that. Well, I don't even know how that was done. That may have been done with. Well, it wasn't done with AI, obviously.
No, obviously not. Well, that's why it's like I'd say assisted, because there is like a connotation where it's like, oh, you just put it in the computer and then it's done. Because that's where I'm like, where I think it's interesting.
There's definitely a balance to all of these things, which is why me hearing that is just based on my minimal connotative knowledge.
Yeah, that's totally fine. Like it is scary and it's challenging to deal with. But again, it's like the assisted part of that term is like, it's like you're selecting like the way it was implemented in Fighting Myself, where it's like you have just like images they're moving like as a visualizer, it's like, because these are old songs. It's like, they are put like, with that context. It's like, there's only so much money in the world to do this. But, if you're going to, it's like, I think what was interesting and what I noticed with that is like kind of like the way like the phenomenon pareidolia. I'm probably pronouncing that wrong, but or pareidolia. Basically,
I'm not familiar.
The brain looking for patterns in like seeing images. And I think with the assisted like part of that, or like in Fighting Myself, if you watch that very carefully, this isn't too deep, but I just interesting like the way that's done. it's moving and it's forming these things, and your brain's kind of trying to figure it out, and that's where the balance is, that you can't just make something like just put in the computer like just yet, and it's not there. Like we're not there yet. So in these times when we have it, like as far as like using it to your advantage, again, it makes it more like if that's the platform you listen to it on, it's like yeah, like I pick out like for like a frame, you see like you mentioned like Kingdom Hearts when we were first
It definitely
watching it.
gave me the
Yeah. Like as far as like that aesthetic, if you've watched like the video, it's like you're picking out these little like things here and there, like as it's changing, and like you're subconsciously like it's trying to form something, but it's like it's not quite there.
Yeah.
I think that's
which I
reflexive.
thought that was interesting. I did like that.
Yeah, I think that's very representative of like doing something new with the old.
Yeah.
As far as like, yes.
Right.
Yeah.
It feels like for my minimal knowledge, it feels like a lot of their songs are kind of processing of guilt.
Yeah, it is, and that's where I'm like the introspection part of art, as far as asking the right questions, specifically asking the right questions. It's like, do you think it's time to end the episode? What else would you like to say? I know it gave you open-ended.
Yeah,
question.
I don't know what to say to close. I will say, it's been really interesting to meet someone so suddenly with so many similar interests. Sure. And that's fun.
It's wild.
And that's part of what is great about having a community that's very art and media driven. Is it's an immediate way to find common ground, no matter what else is different.
Yeah. There's only so much you can do. Like I think with the discourse that had happened the last 3 years, like in the world, there's only so much that you can say online. That's not a new idea, but it's like that really had been put to the test.
But
I think
what you say on microphone or off is reflective of what gets pushed forward.
Yeah.
Say what you feel like is important.
Joseph, thank you so much for being on the show today.
Thank you.
Where can people find your music?
My name is Joseph Fisher-Schramm. You can find me on all of the major streaming services under my own name. On Spotify in particular, and on YouTube, I have different playlists that on YouTube it's live performances, so it includes not just me with my band, but other people with whom I've collaborated.
Yeah.
On Spotify, I have a playlist called And I Helped, and it's a playlist of a bunch of songs that are not under my name, so I either guested or produced or orchestrated, whatever.
Yeah.
So again, now that I'm at a point where I'm kind of like letting the quote-unquote Joseph Fisher-Schramm work take a back seat to celebrate everyone around me, those are the things that I'm kind of more excited about, is look at all of this stuff that I've been lucky enough to do with these other people.
Yeah.
The board game soundtrack will be super fun. I don't want to give too much of that away yet, but those are the things right now. TXYZ, Envies, Court Huang, Miles Kennedy, your boy.
Yeah. I had a lot to talk about because there's a lot to cover.
One
So
could talk
thank you.
forever with the right person.
Well,
Thank you for the delicious coffee, by the way.
oh, thanks. Yeah. For those who follow me on Instagram, I love coffee.
You
Not
should reword
literally.
that sentence.
I
What do you do with coffee?
I
I don't think I want to use that
love-
cup.
I do love a good cup of coffee.
Who made that? Or where were those beans?
From Island Roasters in Richardson.
That was awesome.
Yeah.
Those are good beans.
Thank you. I'm glad we got to spill the beans.
Hey.
That's the end. Thank you for all for listening again. It's been wild. It's gonna be a fun time.
Oh, yeah.
Stay tuned. My name is Sijlent. It's spelled Sijlence.
And my name is Osif.
Should just do like a pig Latin stuff. You know, all that good stuff.
Each day on the bus pig.
Yeah, I guess I should probably save this.
Did you not save it?
And goodbye.